All right, can you see the screen now? I'm hoping that it is being shared. This is the session on navigating the use of social media. And when I share my screen, for some reason, it is not allowing me to see the rest of the folks in our group breakout session. So our host who is helping with this technology today, I hope you will let me know if I am still in the chat room.
Hi, Callie. This is Cindy Kendall. I'm from Shaden office. You're in the
Yes?
room, but I do not see your screen being shared.
All right, so let me get out of this and see if I can.
Check the two boxes at the bottom where it says share screen. There's two boxes at the bottom of the share screen.
Yes, I thought that's what I clicked. So let's try this again.
Okay.
Is it coming up now?
It's starting to. It says you're sharing. Yep, there it is. Good job.
Okay, so I had it all set up and it worked during our rehearsal as well. So far, thank you for your patience, everyone, and thank you, Cindy, for helping out. We are in the session of navigating the use of social media. I am Callie Marksberry. I am the past ISTA treasurer, the one just before Doug Taylor. And I'm also representing NEA on the National Council for the Advancement of Educator Ethics. We have with us Eric Hilton, and again, we all have unusual circumstances. So Eric, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Eric Hilton. I've been representing ISTA for going on 23 years now, and I had my own difficulties this morning, so my background looks a little bit strange. I'm presenting from my car in a parking lot, so I apologize for that, but glad to be here.
All right. Well, you see by our title, we know that due to the COVID situations, our schools had to do a mega switch to virtual learning during all of the at-home situations. And even some of us did blended classrooms where it was combined in person, and we even had students Zooming in. Well, this brought with it unexpected situations for us in the education profession. We are a profession that's already has inherent risks, and Eric and I are here today to present some scenarios that we hope many of you can relate to. We'll have some conversations and discussions about what we might consider as we make what research tells us is about 3,000 decisions that we educators have to make on a daily basis. And we're pretty informal here, so if you wish to ask a question or share, please just jump right in. Well, let's get to our first scenario. And by the way, all the scenarios that we're using today are real. Let's take a look at Ms. Garcia and Ms. Ming. Ms. Garcia and Ms. Ming are both 8th grade English teachers. Ms. Garcia, a new teacher at the school, has additional certification in gifted education. Ms. Ming has been a certified English teacher for a number of years. Ms. Ming has been posting on social media, making negative comments about a colleague's teaching ability without a name, and making comments about Ms. Garcia personally in the faculty lounge. Mr. Daniels, the 8th grade history teacher, has heard Ms. Ming making negative comments about Ms. Garcia on more than one occasion, and he knows that these comments are false. He also knows that Ms. Ming has been angry that Ms. Garcia was asked to teach the advanced English class because this is a class Ms. Ming had expressed a desire to teach. Now, Mr. Daniels believes that this contributes to her negativity toward Ms. Garcia. So what do you do if you are Mr. Daniels, and what would you do if you are Ms. Garcia? So take a moment and you can respond to either one of these questions. What do you think you would do? Just speak right up. Remember to unmute. Is there anyone who would like to share on this one? Well, I'm not seeing any hands and no one has spoken to this particular session or scenario. So we'll go ahead and advance to our next slide. Back in 1915, this particular item was written and appeared in documents by the Ontario Ministry of Education. He was expressing a need for a code of ethics for our education profession. However, no one person or entity tried to create one for education. It wasn't until 2014, 2015 that we had a group of which NEA was a major partner in this endeavor of creating a code for our educators. And the specifics of this were that it was to be written by educators for educators. And having been privileged to sit on that writing team, we were successful. And NEA has promoted and advanced the adoption or adaptation of the Model Code of Ethics for Educators ever since. Now let's take a look at the difference between a code of conduct and a code of ethics. A code of conduct is usually what a Department of Ed might put out. It might be school board policies. It's kind of like the thou shalt nots. These have consequences, such as a disciplinary action, could be a letter of reprimand in someone's file, and or license revocation. But a code of ethics is providing guidance in those really sticky situations where the path or the action that or decision you might make, it might be in a fuzzy area or unclear, kind of a slippery slope, so to speak. So having a code of ethics provides clarification to ethical responsibilities. It defines ethical behavior and best practice, and it serves as a guide to help us make personal and professional decisions. Excuse me. It does provide a common language around these issues, motivating, we hope, critical conversations and thought, and help to mitigate the risks that are just plain inherent in this profession of education. And as I shared, we have a model code of ethics for educators. Later on, we're going to provide the links in our chat room where you can link to this. I didn't realize we were not using the app today that provided these for you. So we're going to give you an opportunity to have this PowerPoint, but also some of the documents that are going to help you in this situation. Just letting you know that this model code of ethics for educators has 5 principles, and under each are indicators that are more specific for that particular principle. Here are the 5 key ones: responsibility to the profession, responsibility for professional competence, responsibility to students, responsibility to the school community, and what we're talking about today, responsible and ethical use of technology. Now, this principle 5 states that the professional educator considers the impact of consuming, creating, distributing, and communicating information through all technologies. Now, I say all because it doesn't matter if they're very antiquated or the latest technology that's out there. The ethical educator is vigilant to make sure that appropriate boundaries of time, place, and role are maintained when using any electronic communication. Now, underneath of this particular principle, you would see 4 specifics: being responsible when you use it, ensuring that the educators or the students we are making sure that their safety and well-being for our students. We are maintaining confidentiality and promoting appropriate use, not just to our students, but to anyone in the educational system who works with students. And it's just common sense, right? But we sometimes take for granted that we and other educators, when we take this for granted, need to keep these three things in mind. These are the keys, not just for social media, but really for all the 5 principles: time, role, and place. So you need to consider, are you working with a student? Are you talking to a parent? Is this happening before your school day starts? Or is it at midnight or even 3 in the morning? And what is your role? Are you the teacher, the bus driver, the para, the counselor, the nurse? Are you a student teacher? And where is this taking place? Well, let's take a look at another scenario. Mr. S is a 5th grade paraprofessional, and he discovers that there's a social media group called I Hate Jessie, a student who happens to be in his 4th grade period art class. Some students at the school have been joining this group and posting negative comments about Jessie. And recently, these cell phone pictures have been taken and posted of Jessie's backside while she's walking in the hall. Well, 3 weeks later, Mr. S notices that there are other pictures appearing online in which Jessie's face has been photoshopped onto other inappropriate images. So what would you do? I know that we face this situation, but we have to think through what we would do, whether we're Mr. S or another educator that has to do with Jessie and any of these students. If you know about it, you need to think about it. And that's how this model code of ethics for educators can be a guide. Here's another scenario. You are a high school student teacher and your cooperating teacher is a veteran teacher. You see some of the students struggling to learn a concept via e-learning using the strategies and methods that your cooperating teacher uses. But you know that the strategies you've been taught in your classes could be helpful. Well, what would you do? Now, this doesn't have to be necessarily keyed in for a student teacher. I will tell you this actually happened with some of the student teachers that I have worked with. We've talked about this. It could be a para in a classroom who may have worked with this student for several years and knows what, or thinks they know what's best for that student. And it's a touchy situation. So this is where the Model Code of Ethics for Educators can help. Our hope is that you take these scenarios today back with you and that you share them and you have conversations about them. Having those critical conversations are going to help you. And let me ask, if you were in either of these scenarios, what would you have done? Let's open this up and please just shout out, what would you do if you were in this situation regarding the posting on the internet or this situation where you know you're working with another teacher? Go ahead, share what your thoughts are.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Schroeder.
Hi,
And
Rebecca.
I teach in a high school situation. So my thoughts are we have like if you see something, you say something with our deans. And so typically our deans, I'd make them aware of what was going on with that social media group and get their, parents involved and the counselors for the student who might be having that issue that they were making the group about. And then for the listening to student teachers, I feel like, approaching it in a manner that is, I like what you're doing. Kind of like sandwiching, like giving praise for what the veteran teacher's doing, but also including your voice and advocating for things you are learning in your class. And hopefully your veteran teacher realizes the resources that student teachers bring to the classroom too.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to share? Well, Rebecca, thanks for your input. Both of those are excellent. We appreciate that. Well, here's another one that really is specific to virtual learning. You're an educator that has to do it. One of your students is experiencing difficulties that cannot be addressed during your allotted time or teaching learning session. So you tell all the students, if they're continuing to experience uncertainty, that they can email you and you'll try to help them after school. Well, the one student that you did notice does actually contact you, emails you or texts you. And at first you discuss the lesson and help the student get a better grasp on the concept. And afterwards, the student starts telling you personal things that are happening at home that make his or her life difficult. And these feelings can sometimes carry over into school, and you offer advice. And pretty soon you're emailing or texting almost nightly, and the conversations get longer and more personal. So this is the slippery slope that I mentioned earlier, where we as educators are by nature nurturing, and we want to help all of our students, every single one. Yet this is where our educators get into trouble. So as we look at these scenarios or anything that you're talking about, you need to have conversations about what issues and concerns there are. How could these situations become a violation of the law, the Model Code of Ethics for Educators, or other school district policies? And what are some potential negative consequences for you as the educator or the teacher, the student, and anyone in your school community? What are some proactive measures that might be considered? Well, how serious is this issue of social media? We have with us, as we said at the beginning, Eric Hilton, who is our ISTA legal counsel. Eric, how serious is this situation?
It's a very serious situation. And I was going to go back to the one scenario that Callie provided, dealing with doing the virtual learning and emailing with the students. We've had several situations that have come up over the last, I guess, ever since kind of the pandemic has started. As far as communicating with students, you have to come up with new ways to communicate. If last year they weren't in class or they might be out on quarantine this time, I had a situation several years ago that we had a teacher who was communicating with the student, via email, helping the student with situations such as applying for colleges and dealing with just some kind of stressors and so forth. And they were communicating on a kind of like a Google Doc or something like that on the school's system. So he did that for the sole purpose of making sure that it is available to the school, that everything could be seen. Well, as they kind of got it more, communicating more, just like this scenario, they started talking about some stuff that got a little bit more serious about her issues at the child's home, other issues they were having with students. And by the time this thing finished, there was almost 1,000 pages of typed comments back and forth between the two over a course of 8 or 10 months. The school corporation then discovered the documents, and ultimately the teacher from a few years ago lost the job, because it just, I mean, once you get into 1,000 pages of communications between two people, there were going to be things in there that kind of crossed the line. And the teacher truly was, I think, attempting to help this individual out, but it got to a situation where they got a little bit too personal into certain things. Nothing inappropriate between the two. It's just a situation where that they were probably giving too much advice on too many things that were outside their role as a educator. So you have to be careful in that situation. The other thing is being involved with students on social media, and even being connected to them through different communication devices. We had a teacher, another situation where a teacher had a situation where she was in a position where students had access to her outside of regular school hours, and could reach out to her on social media and so forth. And you just think about yourself being in a situation like this where something like this could happen, and I'm sure you can probably see this happening. So this teacher gets contacted on social media, on one form of social media at midnight on a Saturday night, It's a message from a student of hers that the student is up at a gas station. She had a big fight with her mom. Someone dropped her off there. She can't go home. She has nowhere to go. And she reached out to the teacher. The teacher drove up there, met with the girl. The girl explains to her that her mother had punched her in the face. She's begging the teacher to please don't call. She's begging the teacher, please not to call in and file police or anything like that, because their mom, if she gets arrested, she's going to go back to jail or go back to prison. And the teacher, tried to call a social worker, couldn't get a hold of anybody, and ultimately decided to let the girl spend the night at her home. And then the next day took her back and got her hooked up with someone. She ended up losing her teaching job. I got a call saying, hey, is there anything we can do to help this person? And I said, she violated multiple school policies about, one, she didn't call law enforcement or DCS when this child was obviously a victim of home violence. But it came down to, it was a situation, had she not been so connected with that child through social media and everything else, that child would not be able to reach out to her on the weekend and do those types of things. And many of you sitting here, if you had a high school student or something that was reaching out to you and in serious distress, I think a lot of you would do similar things about going out and helping this person. But by making yourself accessible through social media, it just puts yourself in a bad spot potentially where something like that could happen to you. And there's obviously could be repercussions. And the teacher admitted, she said, yeah, she knew the right thing to do was to call DCS or call in law enforcement, because the girl had a physical injury to her face, but the girl is, begging her, saying, I love my mom. My mom has been to prison before. If this gets reported, she will go back to prison for a couple of years, and I just cannot have that happen to my mom. And so it's just one of those things that she's now in this situation. It's outside her role as teaching, and the school corporation just had a pretty strict policy about these things, and the fact that she didn't contact DCS or law enforcement, then they had to terminate the teacher's employment. So that becomes an issue. Some of the other things, be very careful using social media while you're at work. I've had several cases that have come up where a school administrator who's just kind of looking for something on a teacher, and this is something to share with your fellow teachers or fellow school employees, that looking for something to find, and they will go on that person's Facebook page and say, oh, wait a minute, they posted something at 12:41 p.m. today during their prep period. Well, although it's their prep period, they're still getting paid by the school corporation to be doing work, and they're outside posting things on Facebook. Therefore, they're in violation of our school social media policy. So you just got to be careful. I think in most situations, schools are not going to have an issue if you're just posting something, generally, but it's a situation that people need to go back and read their social media policies to see what exactly they require. And most are probably going to say, don't use social media while during your contractual day. But as much as social media is used among a lot of people, a lot of places are probably not going to care about it necessarily if it's not interfering with your school environment. But some places, I've had a couple this year already where it's been, hey, and one is in a contentious bargaining situation and part of the state where somebody in the administration was basically going through looking at the bargaining team members' Facebook pages and found one of the bargaining team members who was posted on Facebook during their prep period, and that person came down and was reprimanded, was ordered by the superintendent. The principal was ordered by the superintendent to reprimand that person, and we've since filed an unfair labor practice on it, saying it was for bargaining. They're just trying to retaliate against these people. But it's just be careful putting yourself in that type of a situation. Another thing is, be careful of connecting to the school's Wi-Fi from personal devices for social media. Probably many of you may have heard me talk about this case before, but we had a case one time where high school kids were taking a test. The teacher had connected his personal computer to the school's Wi-Fi. The kids kept laughing during the test, and the teacher kept telling them to be quiet. The he kept telling the kids to be quiet. And finally, after about 10 minutes, one of the kids came up and whispered into the teacher's ear. And while the kids were taking the test, the pornography that the teacher was watching on his computer while the kids were taking the test was being transmitted up to the whiteboard behind him. So the students saw everything that the teacher was watching during that 10 minutes that they were taking the test, and that's why they were giggling. And not surprisingly, that was that teacher's last day of employment in that school corporation. Not surprisingly. And as we go along, if you have questions about these things, please. I'm just trying to give you some examples of things that we've seen come up, and be careful with. One big issue that's really come up in the last year is dealing with kind of more contentious issues with critical race theory, with masks, with those types of things. And I actually just got a call yesterday about somebody that a teacher who had gone on Facebook or gone on social media and was putting out there in the public their positions on the use of pronouns and things like that, and being supportive of certain students in their school corporation, which is all fine and good. But then there are groups out there that are really coming after people right now. They're looking for that type of stuff, and coming after them, and they really attacked this teacher, and went after them and demanded that they be fired because claiming this is what they're teaching the children and so forth. And that I got a call saying, is there anything we can do for this person? And I said, in that situation, not really, because they just put factual information out there, and one of these groups saw it and came in and attacked the teacher on it. And unfortunately, when you take those positions in public, you're going to, these days, it's much worse as far as these people coming out. And we had another situation where some angry parents came to a school board meeting, demanded that a teacher be fired because they posted on one of these things where it says that I will not follow the law if they make a law that prevents me from teaching certain things about history and so forth. And they demanded that the big group came into a school board meeting and demanded that a teacher be fired. And it turns out they didn't even bother to look at the staff directory, that the teacher didn't even work at that school. It was just their name was associated with that school, and then parents came in. But we're going to be seeing more of that stuff. As far as what you can post, I get a lot of questions about what areas can I talk about on social media, and it would also apply what areas could I go into a school board meeting and talk about. The First Amendment case law, as far as it deals with issues of social media and so forth, it's pretty restrictive on a teacher, a school employee, as to what they can comment on. So basically, the parameters are that you are allowed to anything that's kind of a public issue as a member of a community and so forth. You are allowed to go out and make comments on and support or not support, just like the pronoun thing. I mean, it's that teacher has a right to go out and share their views. If you live in a very conservative community, that may not go over as well, but you have the right to go out there and do that. The example that I use is, for example, if your school is having a referendum, the way the law works is that if you're a member of that community and you want to go out and say, I absolutely oppose this referendum, we don't need to have our taxes raised. I'm already paying high taxes. I don't think we need to put this referendum in place and raise all of our taxes. That is perfectly okay. That's protected by the First Amendment. You can go out on social media and do those things. What you can't do is you can't do speech that would be considered part of your teaching duties. So if you go out and say, I'm opposed to this referendum because I am a teacher at this school corporation and I see how this school corporation wastes money every day, then that would be more of work speech, that you're basically going out, that the courts have ruled that's going out and kind of complaining about your teaching position. And you're talking about issues that you would only have information about because you are an employee of the school corporation, whether it's a teacher, a para, or anything else. If you talk about your personal job and you make complaints about that, that's considered work speech, and that's not necessarily protected by the First Amendment. So if you go out on social media, it's okay to support what the school is doing. It's just if you get critical in situations about things going on in the school, it's, if you're doing it as a parent and you're just saying that my child is in this class and I don't like the way that math is being taught, that's okay. But if it's information that you're you're in possession of only as a result of you being an employee of the school corporation, is that you have to be careful posting that information on social media. A couple more things, and then we'll get some questions here. The one thing too is that some schools will look at a posting on social media that, for example, I think there was a case in Indiana recently that no, I can't remember if it was in Indiana or somewhere else, but it was a situation where it was an African American male principal. He was married to a white female, and on his Facebook page he had some like pictures of them at the beach, kissing, just kissing like a husband and wife would do. Nothing too bad. And the school corporation, demanded that he take those pictures down, and then I think he was ultimately terminated because it caused such a disruption in the small community in which they were in. So, in certain situations, you need to be careful what you put on Facebook. And that one was a pretty ridiculous situation, and it was, but it kind of shows how easily something like that could be looked at by the community. What might be something that you post if you live in Indianapolis, maybe thought differently than if you live in a smaller community somewhere around the state. So sometimes what schools look at is, even if it's just information that you're out there posting that doesn't have to do with your job, if it's something that causes a substantial disruption within your school corporation or within your teaching. And I just had one probably 2 weeks ago, that we had a teacher that had an OnlyFans page, and it was where they shared nude pictures and stuff, and they were getting paid for money, and kids discovered it. And obviously, I think it was a middle school teacher. Obviously, that's probably going to cause a substantial disruption in the school, and parents were complaining about it. And at that point, the school said, well, we can't have somebody here that's posting those kinds of pictures on a website to make money. And in the end, that's not something we can necessarily to defend, because of substantial disruption that it caused, and the fact that the school could say, well, this is going to make it difficult for her to stand in front of a classroom of kids because of what these things are that she has on this website. So, I mean, there's more and more issues that come up all the time, and I just had another one recently, just in the last few weeks, that it was a situation where this kind of goes back to connecting on the Wi-Fi with the school. Two teachers were communicating via text. They were two building reps, and one of the teachers said something about a work stoppage and how much he hated the principal, and that this principal needs to go, and just really said some bad things about the principal. And then the teacher who received the text message, not the one that said the negative thing, but whatever she did, she plugged her phone into her school computer to back up something, and then it kind of, however that cloud and everything else works, kind of swiped all her text messages off of her phone onto her computer. And then at the end of the year, she turned her computer in. It wasn't wiped clean. It was actually, I think it was a loaner computer. So she turned it back in when she got her other one back, and then it was loaned out to somebody else. And once somebody else used it, then they found all those text messages that were critical of the principal, and that person turned it in, and then there was some repercussions for the person who made the comments. And so it's just kind of be careful connecting to the school's Wi-Fi and social media networks, because some of those things can get transferred. So those are kind of the areas that I wanted to talk about, just kind of different social medias, and I'd be happy to hear if anybody had social media questions that you've dealt with or you've seen that I might be able to answer. And I can see, as I'm sitting here in the parking lot, I'm getting more and more bathed in sunlight that's coming through my car. So I'll try to keep the glare down a little bit. But if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer situations that you faced.
I have a question. I'm the E&L teacher at a high school, and a lot of times Instagram is the way they like to send messages asking questions about just information about what's happening at the school, or maybe they're lost as they're newcomers to the building. They prefer that over email because I guess it's faster and it's kind of like their mode of communication. I just want to make sure that you feel that that's appropriate, or should I direct them to more of an email kind of situation?
my very strict answer from a legal perspective is, do not communicate with them over Instagram, but communicate with them over, email. But I understand different student populations, different situations. That's always not the best way to reach students and to do that. So what I would just say is if in your situation where it's like, this is, if I do it over email, I'm not going to hear from these kids. I'm not going to be able to hear what their needs are because they just don't communicate that way, or they don't even have access to the email, but they do to an Instagram. Then I would just make sure, check your school social media policy. And then if there's something that you have to do to permit that, then I would get something in writing from an administrator saying, yes, for this particular situation, I understand with these kids that this might, culturally and whatever else, this might be the easiest way for them to communicate. We feel like you need to have those communications. So you're given permission to do that. But even if you're doing that in that situation, you might even want to do something whereas you, however I don't do Instagram, but however Instagram is set up, you might want to do it where the principal might be able to have access to that as well, the communications or something, just so you can say, yeah, I mean, if you need to ever check these, you can jump on here as well. So just kind of, again, from a legal perspective, I sit there and say, don't give out your cell phone number, don't give it, don't be friends on Facebook, don't do these things. But it's just the reality these days of how you communicate with these students, and especially to a population that may not have other means. Just if you're going to do it, make sure it complies with your school policy on social media, and also beyond that, say this is what I'm doing. Just get somebody to send you an email back saying, yes, that sounds okay.
Thank you very much. That makes a lot of sense. I appreciate that.
Any other questions? All right, Callie, I want to go back to you.
All right, thanks. One of the things that we wanted to make sure you understood was think before you post anything online. Remember those 3 key principles of time, role, place. A lot of times we answer things in a knee-jerk reaction. We do it quickly to our students or a parent. And it's often difficult to get the interpretation of someone's tone or their intent. And I will also share another one that is a real case where we had a teacher who would always tell their kids, I love you all. And as someone emailed or texted this teacher, they signed it, love ya. And eventually that got the educator into a little hot water. You just have, we want our best intentions. We have best intentions, but you just have to be so careful because once it's out there, it's out there. If anyone has anything else to share, please don't hesitate. Trying to get, there we go. I didn't know we weren't using an app for this particular conference, and I will tell you that there is a brochure out there. We were going to also share what the Ohio Department of Ed puts out from the Department of Ed on social media, which is really good. I have a friend who works there and allowed us to recreate it or duplicate it for you, as well as what are the top things that you need to know regarding social media. And you can, my email is at the end of this, but you can also email Angela Miller or Kara Seward. They all have access to this. You can have a copy of the PowerPoint as well as these documents yourself. Some resources that might be handy for you to, as you go through this, we have SchoolMe, which is an NEA blog, and they also do podcasts, and they actually did some podcasts on ethics, so that will be a good resource for you. Another one is, why isn't it coming up? There we go. We have other resources, and you're going to see several from NEA on this because, as I said, NEA was a partner. Now, if you go to NASDAQ, this one down here, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but you're going to see additional webinars, podcasts, and blog posts, including panel discussions and interviews. But if you go to the top ribbon and you see resources or academy, click on that drop-down menu because they do offer a course that you can actually use. It runs about $198 for the course toward relicensure. So keep that in mind. NEA also has micro-credentials on each one of these principles, these 5 principles, and then they have one on the entire document. That's a good one for you to get toward relicensure. And then I have the link for the full listing of micro-credentials through NEA. Here are 2 resources, 2 grants that you can apply for if you want to pursue something along these lines with ethics or just this particular issue on social media. You'll see that the next deadline is December the 1st, and I know that's coming up quickly, but be thinking about these because if you want to do something along these lines, contact me. My contact information is at the end of this slide deck, and together we'll write that grant with some help, okay? We're going to ask you to elevate our profession. This is an invitation to all of you. Would you please take these documents, print them out, or just share them virtually or electronically, the Model Code of Ethics for Educators. I will tell you that ISTA has put this particular Code of Ethics in the ISTA board policy. And in April of this next year, the delegates who are attending the ISTA Representative Assembly will be voting to include this document in our resolutions and our bylaws, which brings all of our governing documents in alignment with that board policy. And we think it would be great if you would like to do some training with your grade level, your whole staff in your school, maybe reach out to your district councils. All you have to do is contact your UNISERV director, an ISTA officer, or myself if you have any questions or concerns. And please email me. Eric and I both have our contact on our last slide, and we want to thank all of you for joining our session today. A big thank you to Eric because he's had to come in our session under unusual circumstances. And I know many of you are taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today, and we certainly appreciate that.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you all. I know that if you want to stay online, I was told that many, our 45 minutes was up, but I want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to share or ask questions. And if that is the case,
and we will have them